How's it going? Welcome back to another great video with your host, The Savior. And oh yes, we've got something quite incredible to look at today, because would you know it, the people behind Ubisoft, well, ex-Ubisoft, have created a Zelda-like inspired game. And today I'm going to be giving you my Eternal Strands review. This is the early access Eternal Strands review video. Basically, I'm going to detail everything that you need to know about this game so you can make an informed decision based on if it's your cup of tea or not. Welcome back, my wonderful wise ones. It's great to have you here, as always. And if you're not a wise one, what are you doing with your life right now, okay? Have you not heard of the wise ones? Join the channel right now.
Men and women from all over the globe are joining up to fight for the future.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
They're doing their part. Are you?
But in all seriousness, it is great to have you back, my wonderful wise ones, and for any new viewers, do join this community if you love video essays, gaming analysis, early access reviews, and deep philosophical videos around life and gaming. I combine them two together to create something new, to give you something useful, I hope. So do join this channel, become a wise one, think for yourself, and let's analyze this game. So Eternal Strands is actually made by a new studio, okay? And like I said, they are made up of ex-Ubisoft developers and from other veteran game developers around the world. Now, I was actually lucky enough to talk with these guys in the flesh, which was quite an interesting experience. I didn't talk to them for a massive amount of time, but it was at the Tokyo Game Show event, and it was still pretty cool to actually hear, their reasons as to why they wanted to create something new and different. But sadly, it does feel like they have returned into the familiar Ubisoft design philosophy, okay? The usual Ubisoft tropes, I should say. So this is based on what I've actually played hands-on so far. But honestly, this game is going to be not for everyone, okay? It's going to be very good for a particular gamer, but not for everyone else. So that's what I hope to help you with today. I'm going to go into the positives and the negatives like I do with all of my early access reviews. So in Eternal Strands, this game is all about physics and the elements. And I know since the dawn of goddamn video games, since, we got 3D video games, and it turned from little Pac-Man eating up those little crack tablets or whatever the hell he's eating to 3D video games, we've kind of played around with elements, especially, after Bioshock and stuff, with electricity, fire, and all that good stuff, telekinesis. It's kind of a played out trope at this point, but it's how you use those elements in video games that make them interesting. And what this game does is it plays with physics, and I do love physics in video games. Please take me back to the good old days of this. So don't get me wrong, I do absolutely love physics in video games, and I like the idea of a whole game being built around the physics engine, okay? I loved games like Far Cry 2, GTA 4, all of this stuff that really utilized and pushed physics to the maximum, but now it's just kind of a staple, mechanic, gameplay feature in most AAA games, and they don't really push it, and they don't really try and innovate it or, tie it into the actual gameplay mechanics and the actual gameplay itself, which is a shame. It's more of just like a way to make the world feel realistic. The bush moves when you walk through it, but some games really did use physics as a way to, actually make themselves stand out. If you think about the old Battlefield games and how destructible environments were huge back then, it's kind of a little bit more played down these days. So it feels like it's returning to that kind of root of old school gaming, which I really do appreciate. So basically, in Eternal Strands, you play as a weaver. Yes, you are a wizard, Harry, because in this, you have the ability to cast ice, fire, and telekinesis, okay? But it goes a lot more deeper in that, which I'll talk about more later. But basically, the basic story is you are a weaver, an outcast in this world, in this universe. Weavers are basically, outlawed, okay? Magic has been frowned upon, kind of like in The Witcher, because there was a big catastrophe and now mages are looked at with a lot of disdain and they're being blamed for everything. And the source of magic comes from this place called the Enclave, and that's where you're trying to get to, and that's basically the story, okay? You travel with a band of other characters, but do not be fooled by its looks, okay? This is not an open world game. This is a game where you go on hub-based missions, okay? So big open areas, but they aren't open world, and it depends on the season, the time of day, that you can go out and do different things within these hub open worlds, which I think is pretty cool, and it's got a big emphasis on fighting big bosses, okay? I think there are around 9 giant bosses, very similar to Shadow of the Colossus. The developers said themselves they took a lot of inspiration from that game, and something like Dragon's Dogma, okay? But what sets it apart is the physics-based gameplay, playing with those elements. It goes deep into the actual combat, but also the crafting mechanics in this game as well, which I think is quite cool, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So now let's get into some positives and negatives. Now you know roughly what this game is about. Now the first negative I would have to start off with is the fact that none of these characters so far have truly gripped me, okay? They all feel very artificial, okay? And what I mean by that is they just don't have a lot of chemistry. Obviously, if I spend more time with the game, I might feel different, so I'm not going to completely judge it on that. But just also the way the story is told. Basically, the way it's done is you have gameplay and some cutscenes within the gameplay. Then you have literal animation of, a completely different art style, very anime-esque, which kind of takes you out of it. If I'm honest, it looks cool, but it takes you out of it, because then you also have this art style where it's kind of a simple comic, still image of 2 characters talking back and forth, and that can be pretty goddamn boring. I've got to be honest. You've got to have a lot of patience, and it has to have such gripping writing to pull you into this kind of conversation system. And sadly, the writing so far seems to be quite childish. Perhaps this game is for a younger audience, so younger people might enjoy it, but I can't imagine they're going to want to sit through all of this and, just kind of rattle off a conversation like this. This style just doesn't do it justice, and if you want to do this kind of style, I understand of the budget, if it's not quite there and you need to save on costs, but you need to have a better story and better writing, in my opinion. Characters that really have something to say. Let's put it this way, okay? You're not going to be discussing Hegel's dialectics with an overlord dictator that took inspiration from the Romans in something like Fallout New Vegas, okay? It's not that level of writing, and it doesn't seem to have that level of depth like The Witcher does. I understand that it's going for high fantasy, but at times it does kind of remind me of, Dragon Age, the new game, where it's very out of touch with reality, and it's just a little bit boring. Luckily, it's not preachy, but it does feel a little bit boring at times. So this game is basically a Breath of the Wild clone, but with different elements, okay? And to be honest, we don't get many of that type of game genre. We get tons of Souls-likes, but we don't get many Zelda-likes. And it does feel refreshing in that regard. But also, I feel like they are quite constrained with their design, okay? So it's very Ubisoft in the sense that, you're basically going to be told exactly what to do, where to go. When you're on a mission, there are areas that you can just explore freely, but at times it does feel like they're trying to force you down a tunnel, even though there's, a great big hub areas to explore. And I'm not saying it's always like that, but some of the missions do feel like that from what I've seen. So some of the positives, let's get into them. The combat itself is a lot of fun. Like I said, it is all physics-based, around telekinesis, fire, and ice. And obviously your abilities will level up as you scale and progress through the game, and you unlock new abilities, find different schematics across the world, because you do have a hub area that you need to upgrade. It is that type of game. So if you like that type of thing, a little bit similar to Hogwarts Legacy in the fact that you have to upgrade certain, you know, kind of crafting stations and stuff like that. But the crafting here is quite cool because the resources that you collect from enemies and the environment around you actually can go into creating unique armors, and materials themselves, just like in Zelda, have elemental properties. So if you want to create, you know, a warm piece of clothing, you need to actually use resources that will make the clothing more warm, and that will even affect the color changes, the style of the clothing. So the resources themselves actually feed into the crafting, and I think that's quite a cool feature and quite realistic. And you know, the seasons change in this game, so it does matter what you wear, and like I said, that is a big thing with this game, and I really do love that. They basically took Breath of the Wild, that whole weather system, and made it even better. So that's a massive positive for me. Just like in Zelda Breath of the Wild, of course, you can climb absolutely anything, free climb, whatever you want. So that's a lot of fun when you are exploring, when it does let you off the leash, which I assume happens more throughout the game, when you can go off, find schematics and all that kind of stuff to, you know, upgrade your weapons, your armor, and to unlock more stuff at, you know, the home base, which you do need to slowly progress and upgrade if you want. I hope you are enjoying this Eternal Strands review, this Eternal Strands game review, and just a quick reminder, if you aren't subscribed already, make sure that you do subscribe, join this Wise One community, because I do try and create good quality early reviews, and if I really love a game, I will go back and analyze them in a yearly review and give you some kind of philosophical angle and all that kind of stuff. I'm really passionate about the community here, doing OG YouTube and just having a back and forth with you guys. So sound off in the comments, like the video, let me know what you think about this game, and consider supporting me by dropping a thanks or checking out my music on Spotify. That would mean a lot. But yeah, I really just want to have a conversation with you guys. That's what makes this all fun for me. So I really do like the crafting. Like I said, I think that is handled really moistly. And yeah, it's just pretty cool, to be honest, because each actual element will react differently when you are crafting something. And that's pretty cool, and attention to detail. It makes going out into the world, chopping down something by accident, you know, or picking up something with the telekinesis, because everything does have physics, which is pretty cool. Every object in the game pretty much has physics, and I love how they interact with each other. That's very satisfying, and you know, it's annoying if you have to grind for resources. I haven't seen that much yet if you have to really grind, but it seems like there's a steady supply of resources, and there is a penalty from dying. You will drop a lot of resources on death, so it does incentivize you to play, you know, smart and to actually be good at the combat. So the combat is a mixture of hack and slash and the abilities that you get, the different magic that you unlock. And like I said, you can do some crazy stuff with it later on, like with the ice. You can literally become Ice Woman, one with the ice, okay, and fully encase yourself with ice. That's pretty cool. The same thing with fire. There's so many different things to unlock later on, and I love how they all interact with each other. You know, stuff in the world will either, you know, be easy to catch on fire, and a lot of the things you can just pick up with telekinesis, grab an enemy and just chuck them off the cliff, literally pin down limbs of the bosses with the ice element, or set them on fire, you know, climb up on them and find weak points and stuff like that. So that stuff is very dynamic and cool, and I hope the gameplay allows more of that. But on the actual missions themselves, it does feel quite linear in that it's trying to just tell you exactly how to do it. It doesn't really give you true creative freedom with the whole environment. But I really do like that they do give you creative freedom with the combat itself and how all the elements interact with each other. You know, make a giant ice wall, encase an enemy in ice so they literally suffocate, hold down one of their limbs, set fire to a nearby forest and lead the enemy into that. That's all really cool stuff. So I think the combat here is just a huge positive for me. That is one of the biggest things about this game that I really like. You can create really cool movesets with the different elements, you know, like put down a kind of vortex and with the telekinesis, and then push things into that vortex to launch it. You know, you can launch yourself, launch giant boulders or tree trunk, set it on fire and then launch it. You know, lots of different combinations, which I really do think is pretty cool. The actual swordplay, I hope that gets better with the late game, but as of right now, it's quite simple and quite sluggish, very basic, you know, kind of like the old school Fable games, if you ever played them, with 2 and 3, where you hold down the main attack and it gives you a power attack. Very basic stuff, but cool attention to detail with the actual elements and the physics, you know, like seeing particles arise from the fire, and the same with ice, and how you actually get cold from the environment, and you know, you will burn if you stand in fire, obviously, but it's the way that they all interact, which is quite cool. And changing, you know, your spells will actually change, you know, your kind of clothing as well, your cape, which I just think is a nice visual indicator. I wish they did more away with the HUD, because you don't need all this bullshit clutter. It takes away from the experience, and that's where it still feels very Ubisofty, you know, in the way that it gives you all of this freedom, but it tells you kind of how to play it correctly, how to use the freedom in the way that they, you know, wanted you to. And especially true with the story missions, it feels like, and the characters just aren't really pulling me into the world as of yet, but the gameplay is. Back to the UI stuff, I really don't like the fact that, you know, enemies are highlighted, all of this stuff is kind of flashing at you. It's just very juvenile, the design, and some people might bounce off the art style coming from Dragon Age, and I would understand that, but honestly, this game is a lot more, you know, fun gameplay wise than Dragon Age with combat, and I think that the characters might grow on you the more time you spend with them, hopefully. And the writing, although it's kind of simple, it's kind of a nice chill game just to kind of get into a kind of flow state with. So it's very fun in that regard. I just wish I did more with the exploration, because so far, you know, finding schematics and stuff like that, I just hope they do more of that, but I just don't know with the later game as of yet, because this is Eternal Strands early access review. So yeah, I can only talk about the Eternal Strands review from the gameplay that I've actually, you know, seen. Like I said, this isn't a proper RPG, okay? This is more of an action-focused game playing around with elements, okay? And physics. And I do wish that they kind of went a little bit more ham with the physics. Like, if you could literally break apart some of the mountain and use some of that, then it would make it feel a little bit more dynamic. But I do still love the physics system in here, like I said. Just the fact that you can literally pin down enemies with the ice and, you know, kind of encase their limbs. And the way that all these abilities feed into each other, that's the fun part of it, even if the hack and slash stuff isn't that great. Also, there is different playstyles if you want to focus more on ranged magic or up close and personal. Same thing with using a bow and arrow and stuff like that, and the different weapons. So there is a lot here, and it just all depends if you're happy playing this type of game that isn't open world, that does have some Ubisoft design in there with how you interact with the world, and a story not being absolutely amazing, but the combat, the physics, the elements, all of that stuff is a lot of fun. And if you just want a game that you can just focus on, that has a story that, you know, is kind of linear in that way, that won't take hours and hours and hours, but you can just get through it and it's a fun time, then this might be for you. Those are my positives and negatives, but I would recommend this game maybe for a younger audience and for people who just want something that's kind of fun with physics and, you know, does something different combat-wise, then you might get a kick out of this. So there you go, that is my Eternal Strands review. I do hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know what you think about this game down below in the comments. Let me know if you're going to give it a try. And I do think that the developers are onto something here, and I'm excited to see their next game. But this is a great first, you know, attempt of this kind of game, and if they just play more with the physics in a slightly more original setting, and I think this could be truly something special. Just the way the story is told to me so far, I'm not sure about it, but let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Have a great day, stay wise, peace out.